So good morning, everyone. And I know 8:30 a.m. This is where summer semester hurts, and you need your brains in gear this morning. Notebooks out, and we're going to be talking about color spaces, color management, kind of technical terms, and working on a density test image as well. So all of this is going to be explained and gone through in this video, and then you're going to be actually working on Photoshop and in the print room. You're going to have to work it out with a limited number of printers and take it in turns. But first of all, there'll be a good deal of getting files ready, as you can see. These images here were taken in Afghanistan on my trip in 2018, I think it was, the Afghanistan National Institute of Music, ANIM, amazing center where actually 30% of the population of students were young women, which in Afghanistan is unheard of. And of course, our troops are pulling out of Afghanistan, so it's going to be a difficult history for them moving forward. The Taliban are likely to take over control, and there's already been bombings. There was a bombing of a girls' school just a couple of weeks ago by the Taliban. So, difficult times are ahead for them. But this was an amazing project, and this was one of the musicians in their orchestra, and Dr. Samast is the mastermind of the school, and amazing man from Afghanistan, but had contacts in Australia and Germany and the US, and managed to get support for the school. And amazing project, and I'd be happy to talk to you further about that on another occasion. But let's just look at these images. And well, the black and white image, very straightforward. But when we get to the color image, lots of subtle differences in color and which one is correct. And it gets kind of tricky. And the picture of Dr. Samast as well. Too green or too cyan perhaps, too magenta. Something not quite right, or is it right, or is this one better? Very often if we open an image in Camera Raw and we use the eyedropper tool, if we have either an 18% gray card, as we know, or something white, which in this image, the background is pretty good, we can see that the color snaps into something much closer to what we expect. But what we see on screen is one thing, and what we have in a print is another. And that's what we're going to be working on, thinking about as a part of what we do today. So let's cancel that out and start looking at a couple of documents. The overview document, first of all. So here we are, week 2, 525, color management and gamut. And the word gamut is a fancy word for range of color, and we'll look at that in just a moment. Our lesson plan, just so that you've got an idea of where we're heading with what we're going to be doing. Exhibition print is what we're preparing for, and next class we'll be getting more into actually preparing the exhibition print, 11x14 print, getting the aspect ratio, cropping, borders, a whole bunch of stuff that we'll be talking about later on in the week. So color management will be a term that we're going to talk about. You need your notebooks out. If you don't have your notebooks out already, get them out so that you can take notes while we're going through the video. We're going to talk about color space and gamut and the horseshoe shape that's related to that. You'll see that in just a moment. A description of color management, the management of color from capture to output. In a sense, the definition is there embedded in the term itself. Color management, well, management of color. And then we add from capture to output, and we capture an image with our camera, we output it to a print or a digital output, but we want to make sure that the color is consistent throughout that range. Color correct image, learning to see the subtle differences in color, and density correct image, on-screen guide for printing. And as you can see where we're heading. We're going to be working on a density test image today. We're going to do that to use as a guide for brightness and measure the difference between what an image looks like on screen and what it looks like in print. You're going to adjust an image so you think it looks correct for a print on screen, then print it, and then line it up next to your screen and see, well, is that exactly what I'm seeing? It's difficult. It's not going to be a pure science, but it will help us enormously to get closer to getting the density correct on all of our printing. we're going to end up with 3 guide images, one that's too light, one that's correct, and one that is too dark. And when we have those images, those files on our computer, and we're trying to figure out how to get the density correct on an image, we'll have a great guide image there for us. Next bullet, look at the images in daylight and not in the print room. We know that the lighting in the print room is not great. We're hoping to get new daylight balanced tubes in there for the lights. That's going to make a big difference, but it probably won't be foolproof. But if we just go out into the main exhibition area, out into the foyer, those big windows, the daylight there will be good for seeing the density of the image and measuring it side by side with your screen. So the method, well, we're going to do this, and I'll do a demonstration of this. We're going to check the histogram in curves, turn up the brightness on screen. That's going to be imperative. Make sure that your screen is at its brightest point. And then, first of all, print what you think will be the right image, and then use this as a guide. And then we're going to make 2 other images, 2 other prints, maybe more, to make sure that we've got that range correct. The idea, you will have a file on your desktop to measure the density of other images by. Okay, so that's where we're heading today, and we're going to start by thinking about color management. So give me a minute, and notebooks out, color management. Have that as your main heading, and then underneath the definition, the management of color from capture to output. And the note here, the ICC International Color Consortium Profile, ICC Profile, is an ISO approved color management standard for specifying the attributes of imaging devices such as scanners, digital cameras, monitors, and printers, so that the color of an image remains true from source to destination, from capture to output. A profile can be embedded within the image itself. For more information, visit the International Color Consortium website if you want to do that. www.color.org should take you there. Right now, for your notes, the minimum that you need to have color management is the management of color from capture to output. I got this from a little booklet that Canon put out. It's a very, very old booklet now, but it's a kind of helpful start and guide. And well, back in the day of traditional photography, we were using film. If you look at the first little square here, film camera with a roll of film. So we'd capture the image on film, hopefully get the exposure correct. And then we'd look on a light box, try and figure out which picture that we wanted. Then we go into the darkroom, make a print, and the print would literally be too light, too dark, or the color would be off, and you'd have to use adjustments in the color enlargement to change the color. That was based on CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, as opposed to the RGB, red, green, and blue, that we're very familiar with using in our cameras. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but we'll have to come back to that, no doubt, in another class as well. With digital photography, well, we capture an image with a camera, and well, then we've got our image on the computer, and we'll make a selection, make an adjustment, make a print, and that's going to be the process there. Red, green, and blue, or CMYK, as to color profiles that we might use. RGB is based on light, and we can see these 3 circles of red, green, and blue light. Imagine that you have 3 flashlights, one with a green filter, one with a red filter, one with a blue filter, and you turn them on and you point at them at the screen like this. Where outside of where the light is falling, the beam is falling, it goes black. Where all of those colors in equal proportion overlap, we end up with white right in the middle. Additive process. This is our additive process of adding different colors of light together and combining those to manage our color. CMYK is the subtractive process. We're subtracting color to end up with black in the middle. And we're using inks, cyan ink, yellow ink, magenta ink, and well, if you combine them all together, you end up with this neutral tone. It's not quite black, which is why in our printers we have then black ink and more than one black ink to create more depth and density in an image. The horseshoe shape, we're going to look at that in just a minute down here. This horseshoe here, represents the visible spectrum. That's what we can see with our eyes. And then you see these triangles. We'll look at this better in a minute. These are different color spaces that can be set on our cameras and devices, computers and printers for output and management of color. Move on to our next screen. So what is color management? Well, we've said the management of color from capture to output. These little images of the coffee cup at the bottom here, we can see different subtle differences of color there, and that's what we're going to be looking at. Choosing a printer and display for photography. Well, we can see, you know, the displays here, this one with this huge great screen around it. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's about blocking off ambient light. And one of the labs that we used to use for printing the portfolio show, they would only allow their workers to work in a dark room where there's no light at all, only the light from the monitor. And in fact, they'd wait for their workers, they'd have to acclimatize for 30 minutes before they were allowed to start doing any color correction on the images, so that their eyes would adjust to the light in the room. And actually, controlling ambient light for an ideal environment is really quite a critical thing. If you have very red light in the room, or if you have your monitor and it's lent up against the wall with a red wall, that red all around is going to have an impact on the way that you view the color on your screen. And so neutral color, a gray color, will be the ideal, where there's no tone at all and there's neutral light as well in the room is going to be ideal. So natural light is probably going to be the best kind of second from a really well-controlled space, or working in complete darkness, which is not practical most of the time. So display settings, and here we can see color calibration tools being used on your screen. This is a difficult area, and we do have a color calibrator, but it's notoriously difficult to use, and it's unless you're doing it at the highest level, it's not actually going to be a pure science. That is to say that you're still going to end up making a print that you think looks great on screen. You get the print out, and if you were to compare the print to what you've just looked on your monitor, it's not going to be completely accurate. And in a sense, what we need to do and what we'll be working on today will allow us to get something that's very, very close to what we want on screen, so that we can get a good print output at the end of it. So, you know, a great little introduction there, and we're going to end up having to do 2 videos here, I think, but that's fine. We'll go on to the next one in a minute, and you can probably chat through and discuss this one as well. But the word gamut, you need to write that down on your notes. Gamut, the definition here, the complete range or scope of something, so the whole gamut of human emotion, but we're talking about color. We're not talking about human emotion. So we're going to talk about color here, and the horseshoe again, and you can jot this down on your notes. The horseshoe shape, draw this first of all. This horseshoe shape represents the visible spectrum, red, blue, green at the outer limit. So our eyes see all of that, but our devices that we use, our cameras, our computers, our printers, use a color space. And there are a lot of different color spaces. The 2 that I want you to note are sRGB. S stands for standard, so standard RGB, and Adobe RGB 1998. And we can see that the Adobe color space is larger than the sRGB space in here. So you can just draw this in. I know you haven't got the colors on it, but it will be a good guide for you to know. sRGB is smaller color space, but our printers are based on sRGB, not just our printers, printers in general. If your output and goal as a photographer is to work within print, and that's going to be your final output to a customer, then sRGB definitely the way to go. Very straightforward, and we'd recommend that you take that route. If you're thinking, actually, I'm going to go into editorial photography, photography for advertising, high-end commercial work that's going to be in magazines, Adobe RGB is probably going to be the better way to go. From what you can actually visibly see, almost imperceivable, but certainly within the industry, Adobe RGB will probably be the way to go. And these are color spaces that we set on our cameras. Oops, I didn't mean to click on there. Let's not worry about that. We'll come off of this now. So I think I'm going to close this video up at this point, and we're going to do another one, but that kicks you off with some kind of basics on color management.